Okay, let's unpack this. Think about it. A tiny Caribbean island, Grenada, suddenly becomes this huge focus point. Almost overnight, the United States launches, well, its biggest military operation since Vietnam.
Yeah, it was October 1983, Operation Urgent Fury.
Exactly. And it seems like, a small island, maybe a small conflict,
Yeah.
but the ripples, the impact on U.S. military thinking and global relations, surprisingly big.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is just the speed.
Yeah.
How quickly things went from, internal political chaos in Grenada to this massive international intervention.
Right.
If you connect it to the broader Cold War context, it really feels like a pivotal moment, a real shift in U.S. foreign policy. So you're going to get a really thorough look at what led up to it, the operation itself, and the consequences, which were huge, including the whole question of legality and how it literally changed the U.S. military.
That's the plan. Our mission here is to basically cut through all the complexity, pull out the key pieces of information from the sources you sent over, and give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this often overlooked bit of history. We've set this up so you can get the different angles quickly without getting bogged down. So to really get Urgent Fury, I think we need to step back. What was actually happening on Grenada before the U.S. even showed up? What was the political climate like?
Well, it was messy. After independence from the UK in '74, you had Sir Eric Gairy as the first prime minister.
Okay.
But his time in charge, it was marked by a lot of civil unrest. People were accusing him of corruption, and there was actual street violence between they called it the Mongoose Gang, kind of notorious, and this other group, the New Jewel Movement, the NJM.
And that simmering unrest, it boiled over in March 1979, right?
Absolutely. Gairy was actually out of the country. And Maurice Bishop, leading the NJM, staged this coup. It was almost bloodless, remarkable. Bishop's People's Revolutionary Government, or PRG, took over. They suspended the old constitution, detained some political figures. Bishop himself, he was quite a charismatic speaker, started bringing in Marxist ideas.
Right, the Marxist-Leninist thing.
Yeah, aiming for the first Marxist-Leninist state in the British Commonwealth. Which is interesting because, technically, they still recognized Queen Elizabeth II as the head of state, Queen of Grenada.
Now, one of the really big points of friction, the thing that got Washington really looking closely, was this airport they were building, Point Salines International Airport.
Yes, the airport.
Bishop's government kept saying, look, this is for tourism, it's designed by Canadians, the British helped underwrite it. They argued their existing airport, Pearls, had this tiny runway, like 5,200 feet.
Right, couldn't handle the big jets.
Couldn't handle them, and they couldn't expand it either. Apparently, it was stuck between a mountain and the sea, so they pitched it as, purely economic development.
But President Reagan, he saw it very differently. Starting around March '83, he began talking very publicly about Soviet-Cuban militarization in the Caribbean.
Okay, Cold War rhetoric heating up.
Definitely. His administration argued that this new runway, 9,000 feet long, and these big fuel tanks, that was way over the top for just tourist planes.
So military potential?
That's exactly how Reagan framed it. Evidence of a Soviet-Cuban plan to build a forward military airbase. A projection of power right there in America's backyard.
And yet you had Representative Ron Dellums, who actually went down there, right? Bishop invited him.
He did. A fact-finding mission.
And Dellums came back and told Congress, basically, I've seen it, I've talked to people, and this is about economic development. It always has been. It's not for military use. He actually called the U.S. government's claims absurd and unwarranted.
Yeah, it's striking, isn't it? Two completely opposing views of the exact same construction project.
It really is. And while all this international back and forth was happening, things were actually falling apart inside Bishop's government, too.
That's crucial. In September 1983, there was this internal party meeting. Bishop got pressure to share power with his deputy prime minister, Bernard Coard.
Okay.
Bishop apparently agreed at first, but then he changed his mind.
Yeah.
And that just lit the fuse for a major crisis.
And that crisis just exploded in October '83, like really dramatically. On the 13th, Coard's faction with the Army, the People's Revolutionary Army, or PRA, they put Bishop under house arrest, him and some of his key allies. But then, just 6 days later, October 19th, this huge crowd, estimates are like 30,000 people.
A massive turnout.
Huge. They freed Bishop, and he led them straight to Fort Rupert, the Army headquarters, and they basically took it over.
But it didn't last. Troops loyal to the Coard faction, led by Hudson Austin and Lieutenant Colonel Lane, they attacked the fort.
Yeah.
Bishop and his group surrendered. And then, tragically, Bishop and 7 of his closest supporters were executed, lined up against a wall in the fort's courtyard and shot by a firing squad.
Yep.
Just brutal.
An incredibly brutal end.
And with Bishop gone, that internal power struggle, it created this vacuum. Hudson Austin and the military just stepped right in, took charge, formed a military council, put the Governor General, Sir Paul Scoon, who represented the Queen, under house arrest, and then they clamped down hard. A 4-day, island-wide, shoot-on-sight curfew.
Wow. Shoot on sight.
Yeah, it was this sudden spiral into chaos. Bishop's execution, the military takeover, that really got the Reagan administration's immediate attention.
Oh.
And that's what triggered the U.S. intervention.
Right. And the official reasons given were?
Well, the stated reasons were concerns over the 600 U.S. medical students on the island and this fear of another Iran hostage situation.
Okay, understandable concern on the surface.
Lawrence Eagleburger, who was Under Secretary of State at the time, he later admitted something quite different. He said the prime motivation was actually to get rid of Hudson Austin, and that the students, they were, in his words, a pretext.
A pretext. That's quite an admission. So if the students were secondary, what was the bigger play for Reagan? What was the real goal beyond just removing Austin?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think beyond just Austin, it was very much a Cold War move, a signal.
Showing strength.
Exactly. Pushing back against Soviet and Cuban influence right there in the Caribbean, preventing another country, going fully into the communist camp, and projecting American power, especially after what many saw as the weakness following Vietnam. The students, while a genuine concern for some, provided this very powerful, very sympathetic reason that played well back home. It helped sell the intervention.
And didn't the U.S. also get some kind of formal request from other Caribbean nations?
Yes, there was a formal appeal for help from the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, plus Barbados and Jamaica. But the Governor General's role, Scoon's request, that's where it gets murky.
Oh, so?
Well, the story is he made a secret oral request before the invasion started. But the actual official letter, the written invitation, that wasn't signed until after U.S. troops were already on the ground.
Huh. That timing is convenient.
It is. And add this piece. The U.S. military had actually been practicing for something like this since 1981 as part of these big exercises called Ocean Venture 81. They ran mock invasions of Grenada, Operation Amber they called it, air assaults, amphibious landings on a sort of fictional Caribbean island. So the plans, the capability for a rapid invasion, they were already warmed up, you could say.
Right, so they weren't starting from scratch. Okay, so the political stage is set, it's chaotic. Then comes H hour. 5 a.m., October 25th, 1983, Operation Urgent Fury begins.
That's it. And it was simultaneous. You had troops coming in by helicopter from Barbados, Army Rangers parachuting in from the U.S., and Marines being airlifted off the USS Guam, which was sitting offshore.
Yeah.
It was, as you said, the largest U.S. military action since Vietnam.
Who were they up against? What did the defenders have?
Well, you had about 1,500 Grenadian soldiers from the PRA. Mostly light weapons, though. They didn't really have modern air defenses. They did have about 8 Soviet BTR-60 armored personnel carriers and a couple of BRDM-2 armored cars. So some armor, but no real heavy tanks.
Okay. And the Cubans.
Right, the Cubans. Around 784 Cuban nationals were there. Officially, 630 were listed as construction workers working on that airport.
But the U.S. suspected otherwise.
Exactly. Fidel Castro himself described them as workers and soldiers at the same time, which fits Cuba's sort of citizen-soldier model. Their commander on the island, Colonel Tortolo Comas, actually ordered the construction workers to fight using small arms if attacked, and specifically told them not to surrender. The U.S. government insisted many were military personnel and argued that the tough resistance they put up kind of proved they weren't just construction crews.
So the first day, it sounds like it was pretty rough going right from the start, even before H hour.
Oh, definitely. Special Ops forces went in early for recon, and it was disastrous. A Navy SEAL mission on October 23rd, 4 SEALs were lost at sea. Their bodies were never found.
God, that's awful.
There's a story from one widow about a fisherman who saw 4 guys in wetsuits come out of the water and a couple of days later saw 4 bodies being thrown into the water. Just terrible. Another SEAL mission the next day also basically failed because of bad weather. So they went in with very, very little ground intelligence.
So what were they working with then?
You're hitting on a huge issue. The lack of good intel was a major problem throughout. Famously, American troops ended up using tourist maps, literally. with military grids drawn on them by hand.
Tourist maps. Seriously.
Seriously, imagine trying to coordinate an invasion with that. For example, the main assault on Point Salines Airport. The Rangers were supposed to land their planes on the runway, but they found out mid-area was blocked.
So they had to jump.
They had to switch to a parachute assault under fire from anti-aircraft guns and even those Grenadian APCs. They actually had to grab Cuban construction vehicles, like bulldozers, to clear the runway. They even used one as mobile cover while advancing. Pretty resourceful, but it shows the level of improvisation needed.
Incredible. So with that kind of chaos and bad intel, what else went wrong that first day? It sounds like a mess.
It really was. The Rangers went to secure the True Blue campus, expecting most of the medical students there. They found only 140. Learned most were actually Gand ants, another intelligence failure.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Marines took Pearl's airport on the other side of the island, relatively easily, light resistance there. But a SEAL Team 6 raid on radio-free Grenada, they took the station, but then got pinned down by an APC and had to basically escape into the ocean.
Wow.
Then you had Delta Force and Rangers trying raids on Fort Rupert, where Bishop was killed, and Richmond Hill Prison, trying to get leaders of free prisoners. But those missions were hampered by, quote, inadequate intelligence and planning, resulted in casualties, even a helicopter crash.
Just one thing after another.
And even rescuing Governor General Schoon wasn't straightforward. SEALs got to his mansion, but then Grenadian forces counterattacked. The SEALs were trapped there for a full 24 hours.
Trapped.
Yeah, needed constant air support before Marines could finally fight through and relieve them the next morning. And amidst all this chaos, tragically, Navy A-7 jets mistakenly bombed a mental hospital near Fort Rupert, killing 18 civilians.
Just a terrible tragedy on top of everything else. What about the second day, October 26th? Did things start to stabilize?
Things continued to be quite intense on the 26th, especially with the Cuban forces. They actually ambushed an 82nd Airborne Patrol early in the morning, inflicted some American casualties.
So resistance was still strong in pockets.
Very much so. Yeah. But eventually, after heavy U.S. airstrikes and artillery, the main Cuban force surrendered. And it was after that surrender that U.S. forces discovered this huge cache of Cuban weapons, enough, they said, to equip 6 whole battalions, which of course reinforced the U.S. narrative about militarization.
Right. And the students at Grand Anse?
That rescue mission went better. Rangers evacuated 233 students successfully from the Grand Anse campus. But then they learned there was another group of students at a third location, Prickly Bay.
Oh man, the intel issue again.
Exactly. And in another sign of the confusion, one squad of 11 Rangers got accidentally left behind during the Grand Anse evacuation. They had to be picked up later by the Navy.
Unbelievable. So when did the fighting actually wind down?
By the third day, organized resistance was really fading, although the U.S. forces didn't necessarily know the extent of it immediately. They kept advancing, clearing areas.
Any other major incidents?
There was one notable foul-up during an air assault on the Calavindi barracks. The helicopters came in too fast, apparently trying to suppress any potential defenders, and 2 of them collided.
Oh no. Casualties.
Thankfully, not fatalities in the collision itself, I believe, but injuries. And the ironic part, the barracks turned out to be completely deserted.
Wow. So unnecessary risk, unnecessary accident.
It seems that way. The actual combat operations pretty much ended by November 1st. The last formal action was the peaceful surrender of 19 Grenadian soldiers on the smaller island of Carriacou.
So the final tally, what were the casualties?
Okay, the official numbers from the U.S. side are 19 American service members killed, 116 wounded. For the Cubans, 24 killed, 59 wounded, and 638 captured. And for the Grenadian forces, 45 killed, 358 wounded. And we have to remember those 18 civilians killed in the accidental bombing of the mental hospital.
A heavy price for a short conflict. Now, the legality. This became hugely controversial almost immediately.
Instantly. The U.S. government's justification was twofold: protecting those American students and acting on the request of the Governor General.
But the world didn't really buy it.
Largely, no. The UN General Assembly passed a resolution on November 2nd, days later. It called the invasion a flagrant violation of international law. The vote was overwhelming: 108 in favor, only 9 against, with 27 abstentions.
And the U.S. response?
The U.S. vetoed a similar resolution in the UN Security Council, where they have that power. But the General Assembly vote showed the broad international condemnation. And that whole issue with Governor General Schoon's request never really went away. His memoir says he made an oral request beforehand, but the actual signed document surfaced after the invasion started. Plus, Buckingham Palace denied the Queen had prior knowledge and said she was extremely upset about the invasion of one of her realms.
It really puts the question out there. When is intervention justified?
That's the core debate, and opinions were starkly divided. Inside the U.S., there was actually broad popular support for the invasion. A congressional group even concluded it was justified because of the potential hostage threat to the students.
But not everyone agreed.
No, definitely not. Some members of that same group dissented strongly. Congressman Louis Stokes, for instance, said flat out, not a single American child nor a single American national was in any way placed in danger prior to the invasion.
And the students themselves, what did they say?
It's interesting. Interviews before the invasion generally had students saying they felt safe. But interviews after the invasion, perhaps unsurprisingly, had many expressing gratitude for being rescued. There was also significant opposition, a big anti-war march in D.C., maybe 50,000 people. Bernie Sanders, who was mayor of Burlington, Vermont then, was there.
And internationally, beyond the UN.
Well, the Soviet Union, as you'd expect, condemned it forcefully as aggression, a violation of international law, said it proved no small country was safe.
And Britain. Thatcher and Reagan were close allies?
They were, but Thatcher was reportedly furious, not necessarily about the invasion itself, but because she wasn't properly consulted. She got very short notice. She sent Reagan a message saying she was deeply disturbed and basically asked him to stop it, but it was too late. He apologized later for the communication breakdown. Shows even close alliances have friction points.
Absolutely. So, looking at the aftermath and the legacy, what changed?
Well, politically on Grenada, Sir Paul Scoon took over temporarily. An interim government was set up, led by Nicholas Brathwaite, and they held elections in 1984. But the really big legacy, especially for the U.S., was military.
This is the Goldwater-Nichols Act connection.
Exactly. Operation Urgent Fury, despite being a success in achieving its immediate goals, was plagued by these tactical problems. The different branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, couldn't communicate effectively. Different radios, incompatible gear. Remember the tourist maps?
Yeah, incredible.
It exposed deep systemic problems in how the U.S. military operated jointly. Grenada basically forced Congress to act. The Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986 was a massive reorganization.
What did it do, fundamentally?
It drastically strengthened the power of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, making that person the principal military advisor, not just one voice among equals. And crucially, it mandated jointness. It forced the services to train, plan, and fight together as a unified force, rather than separate services doing their own thing on the same battlefield. Grenada showed, painfully, why that was so necessary.
So, a small island invasion led to a fundamental reshaping of the entire U.S. military structure.
Pretty much. And Reagan also used Grenada politically, didn't he? To combat the so-called Vietnam syndrome.
Right, that public reluctance to get involved in overseas conflicts after Vietnam.
He explicitly framed Grenada as proof that America was strong again. He gave this famous speech saying, "Our days of weakness are over. Our military forces are back on their feet and standing tall." It was very much about restoring national confidence.
And what about Grenada itself? What's the lasting impact there?
Well, October 25th is actually a national holiday now in Grenada. They call it Thanksgiving Day, interestingly enough, marking the intervention. And in a sign of how memories evolve, in 2009, they renamed the airport, the very airport that was such a point of contention.
Point Salines.
Yeah. They renamed it Maurice Bishop International Airport, honoring the leader whose death triggered the whole crisis.
Wow. Full circle.
And there were other ripples. Cuba apparently got really worried the U.S. might try the same thing in Nicaragua, where they had advisors. So they pulled out their female primary school teachers from Nicaragua as a precaution. It just shows, if we connect this to the bigger picture, even these seemingly smaller interventions can have these really wide-ranging, long-lasting effects on everything from military doctrine to geopolitics to national memory.
So there you have it. It's just such a complex story, isn't it? You've got the internal politics tearing Grenada apart, then this rapid, controversial U.S. intervention, the operational struggles on the ground, and then this huge, often overlooked impact on the U.S. military and how America saw its role in the world. A really pivotal and messy moment from the Cold War.
Absolutely. You're really seeing how Operation Urgent Fury acted as this kind of crucible, forcing change not just for Grenada, but for the whole way the U.S. military prepares for and fights war. So here's something to think about. How do those lessons learned in Grenada, particularly around joint operations, intelligence, communication, how do they still influence military planning and execution today, even though warfare itself looks so different now?